back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Big Baby Stef. I'm here with the man himself, Alex Lott, the fantasy phenom. And it's time for our top 12 wide receivers, a buzzer beater right before the NFL draft. We'll be checking in on all of these rookies, all the impacts on all these teams, these situations, these offenses, all the fantasy info you need. But before we do that, we want to hit on our top 12 Dynasty wide receivers. Let's go ahead and put our line in the sand now before these rookies get injected into the league.
Yeah, I think this will be good. One, because with running backs, go watch that video. I don't want to spoil too much. We had a rookie in the top 12. You can probably guess who it is. The landing spot will probably slide him up or down those rankings. For the wide receivers, regardless of if the best wide receiver goes to the best landing spot with the best draft capital, none of these guys are going to crack our top 12. They can be really, really strong in our rankings, especially as we get into 13 through 24 down the line. But for our top 12, we said, hey, rookies in this draft at the wide receiver spot, we love this class. It's a deep class, but these 12 names are super strong. So let's go ahead, put these names out there. Let's talk through some of these situations. Yes, there's a chance that a couple of these guys might get a small bump down, depending on what happens with the draft. Maybe we see some crazy trades. We know Deebo Samuel trade rumors are swirling. So by the time you're watching, we could see some action there. So we're going to talk through these guys. We'll be sure to hit on those situations and things that could happen as we go. But these 12 names at the wide receiver spot, I mean, also strong. And it's always that battle in Dynasty, balancing out the age of these guys and what the age apex is for their position. Wide receiver, it's closer to age 28 when they're really in their prime, age 27, 28. So it's going to be fun to talk about, some of these young guns that are new on the scene, along with some of these old guys that have been getting it done for quite a while.
It's crazy, too, how many just solid wide receiver twos or
yes.
guys that, right? Some guys get there with the high floor. Other guys get there with the pop weeks and the ups and downs. But we know wide receiver two in Dynasty, they're a dime a dozen. You can find them all over the place. But let's take it from the top with our top 12 because there is a premium on these names. We just saw a team in our league win the championship against you with a wide receiver core of Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Shout out to our boys in that league. But that's the chalk. Number one and number two. We have Jamar Chase, number one, over Justin Jefferson. Any Dynasty fantasy ranking service that you look at, these are going to be the top two guys. Jamar Chase looks to have everything going for him that Justin Jefferson does. I think the one clear difference when you look at it just at a high level is Jamar Chase is 22, Justin Jefferson is 23. But both put up over 1,400 yards as rookies. Both had 23+% target shares. They're both wide receiver ones on their teams. They are both top 10 in air yards and air yard share as rookies, both top 8 in yards after the catch as rookies. And now both have stability at the quarterback position with Kirk Cousins getting the one-year extension, the fully guaranteed $35 million. So he'll be on that team at quarterback at least to the end of 2023. But I give the tiebreak to the Burrow and Chase connection on top of the continuity with the coaching staff and the GM. We saw Minnesota hit the reset button in their front office.
Both of these guys you obviously love to have, and these two are in a tier of their own for me, and I'm guessing you as well as these top two guys. But yeah, Chase gets the small tiebreaker for me in 3 or 4 of these different categories, which is why we do have him as that 1A, if you will, in our rankings, officially coming in at that one spot. One, you said at the age a year younger. One tied to Joe Burrow rather than Kirk Cousins, and Joe Burrow being as young as he is, we could see them together for the next 10 years in the league. Things change quickly in the NFL, as we've seen this offseason, but you love to see Burrow as the quarterback for Jamar Chase. And then I think another thing in Chase's favor is just that all we saw from him was his rookie season. Like Justin Jefferson had a really good rookie year, really built on it nicely in his sophomore season. I think Jamar Chase has just scratched the surface. We have to remember 2021 was the first time he had played football in 2 years because he sat out in his final year of college eligibility or the final year of college before he went to the draft because of COVID. So Jamar Chase came off of a year of not even playing football to do what he did with the Cincinnati Bengals. And when we look at Jamar Chase and just the way he plays, I mean, he's a big play waiting to happen. He had, the close to 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns, but only on 81 receptions, only 128 targets as a rookie for Jamar Chase. So I know you've got T. Higgins there right now. Tyler Boyd is still there right now. But Jamar Chase, if we ever saw a season where he pushed closer to that 150 targets, we could see him blow up to a level above and beyond what he did as a rookie. So I love both of them for a rebuilding dynasty team, just because a wide receiver is going to have more longevity than if you start out with a Jonathan Taylor or a DeAndre Swift or some of the top young running backs. So these two at the top, just a tier of their own at wide receiver.
Now, you could say Justin Jefferson could command a greater target share in 2022 because he has worse target competition. You mentioned some of the names there in Cincinnati. We will see if Minnesota ends up drafting a wide receiver. Shout out to our boys, Derek and Curb Stomp in the Discord, talking about the Vikings situation. We got some Vikings homers pounding the table saying that the Vikings will be looking at wide receiver in this draft. So we'll see what happens coming up this weekend. But if things break the right way in Cincy with the revamped offensive line, we might see potentially a Higgins or a Boyd go down. It's nothing but runway for Jamar Chase. And let's not say anything negative here against Justin Jefferson at all, because he was unreal in year two, a 29.9% target share, 167 targets, just over 1,600 receiving yards, number one in deep targets, number one in air yards, seventh in yak, 10 touchdowns, 19.5 fantasy points per game. That was fourth amongst all wide receivers behind Cooper Kupp, Davante Adams, and Deebo Samuel. So Justin Jefferson has just shown it, but we like the situation slightly more for Chase and the connection with the QB. But at wide receiver 3 for us is the man himself, A.J. Brown, coming off a kind of down season based on where his ADP was in redraft leagues. Played in 13 games, but had 2 games with less than a 50% snap share. His per game averages, if you take out those 2 games where he left early, 8.6 targets per game, 5.3 receptions per game, 73 yards, and 16.3 fantasy points per game would have been the wide receiver 11. So we're already seeing him come in when you take out some of the dud games where he left early, things like that. If you look at it at aggregate level, it's not going to be that sexy. But if you take those games into context, he's already a wide receiver 1 at 24.8 years old. He's about to enter that prime. So we're not even seeing necessarily all of A.J. Brown yet. We know he played last year banged up for a lot of the season and still commanded a 27% target share, which was 9th amongst all wide receivers, a 41% air yard share. When this team goes deep, they go to A.J. Brown. He was carrying a passing game in the NFL. Now the competition for him this year is maybe a wide receiver from the draft, maybe a rookie. But other than that, a 30-year-old Robert Woods coming off an ACL tear, Nick Westbrook, Ikeen, Austin Hooper, come on. This is A.J. Brown's passing game through and through. We've already seen what he can do.
Yeah, gotta love A.J. Brown. And it feels like A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, like a year or two ago, are what we have in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson now, although Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson have already eclipsed what we saw from these two guys in A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But for me, A.J. Brown's actually my number 5 right now. And he's behind Ceedee Lamb for me. He's behind Cooper Kupp for me. And for me right now, it just comes down to what I think his upside could be in this Tennessee offense. We see time and time again these high volume receivers, even with Jamar Chase, 120-ish targets as a rookie, and we say that needs to get up to 150, but the roadmap to get there is very clear. So for A.J. Brown, I think we haven't seen him have the big target totals, and that's always been kind of the fire and ice with A.J. Brown. It's like, hey, we got a physical freak who is not only fast, can get downfield, but he can also get the ball at the line of scrimmage and take it to the house 80 yards. And he can truck guys to it. I mean, he's huge, 6'1", 225 pounds. So with A.J. Brown, we love the physical ability. He can do a lot with a little bit of targets. He can get those deep targets from Ryan Tannehill in the play action passing game. I think last year it was impressive that A.J. Brown still had some of the good games that he had, and in 13 games was able to post 870 yards and 5 touchdowns, because the Titans were all out of sorts last year. When Derrick Henry went down, it really hurt this team's identity. You mentioned A.J. Brown was fighting injuries as well. So for me, I love A.J. Brown as a player. I love that he's still young, hasn't even walked into his prime yet at still age 24. I just don't like the situation right now as much as guys like Ceedee Lamb, as much as guys like Cooper Kupp. And if I'm a contending roster, I would prefer those guys right now. So for A.J. Brown, the hope would be maybe after the Ryan Tannehill era, we see, or after the Derrick Henry era, even, we see this offense open up. They've been like a sleeper spot for a quarterback in this draft as well, which could be interesting. We see these situations change really fast in the NFL, like Russell Wilson coming to Denver and saving the needs of those wide receivers in a bad situation. So things can change fast. With A.J. Brown, he's even been rumored to be traded. So who knows if that would boost or hurt his stock. So I love A.J. Brown as a player. The only reason he's my number 5 and not my number 3 is because of the situation and some of that upside because of the volume of the offense.
Now you mentioned our number 4, Ceedee Lamb. To me, this is the prove-it year for Ceedee. The problem isn't the 1,100 receiving yards. It's the low target share. 18% as a rookie, 20% as a sophomore. There's rumors of bringing Treylon Burks into the offense or potentially a wide receiver. I don't tend to believe the Cowboys are going to go wide receiver in the first round. I think they might take a shot on somebody in the second or third. But we have yet to see that wide receiver 1 alpha season from Ceedee Lamb next to Amari Cooper. So now that Amari Cooper's gone and you have Dak bringing the stability and the volume, does that give Ceedee Lamb the ability to take that next step this year with that passing game clearing up? We did see Lamb carry the passing game in a few game scripts last season, 9 for 149 and 2 against New England. He flashes upside with a 36 fantasy point outing. He was the wide receiver 1 on the week. Shout out to the Dak and CD stacks I had that week. But we know opportunity is king for these wide receivers because all the guys that we're naming right now are top ends of the talent pool. I need to see that 25% plus from Ceedee Lamb, and I think he can do that this year, in which case he will stay firmly in this top 5.
Yeah, man, I love Ceedee Lamb, and a lot of it is projecting that step forward in his third season. You love that he's still only 23 years old, which is awesome. You mentioned Amari Cooper's going to be gone. The tough thing and the interesting thing about Ceedee Lamb, I mean, really small sample size last year. Amari Cooper only missed actually 2 games last season. It feels like he missed a lot more because he was kind of playing, it looked like, with some lingering effects from COVID and wasn't getting a full snap share and things like that down the stretch. But in the 2 games that Amari Cooper missed, one of them Ceedee Lamb missed as well, so we don't get a sample size there. And the other one, Ceedee Lamb had 3 receptions for 14 yards against Kansas City. So in this offense, you project Dak Prescott to have a good amount of pass attempts. You project Ceedee Lamb to be the clear-cut number 1. So everything on paper is to like about Ceedee Lamb this season and beyond. You mentioned Cooper gone. Obviously, Michael Gallup kind of getting revamped from that ACL injury. He might be up to a slow start. So this is going to revolve around Ceedee Lamb. This passing offense is going to revolve around CD. But it's just a question of how many targets are going to be in this offense. Going into last season, we loved Cooper, Lamb, and Gallup because the Dallas Cowboys narrative was bad defense, which leads to a lot of these high volume game scripts, these shootouts. And we saw that defense really step up with the emergence of Trayvon Diggs, with Micah Parsons coming in as an impact player right off the bat. So I know the Cowboys have lost some pieces on the edge and on the offensive line. So there are some holes to fill, and the team identity could look a little bit different. But if this Cowboys defense is as good in 2022 as it was in 2021, we might not get the volume from the passing game that we want. So with Michael Gallup still there, and he will be back from that ACL eventually, with Dalton Schultz emerging as a 6-7 target a game guy at the tight end spot, James Washington comes in to potentially take that Cedric Wilson role, and then you could add a name in the draft as well. I think there are still a lot of targets and a lot of options for Dak Prescott. So even with all that being said, I still love Ceedee Lamb in these dynasty leagues. He's my wide receiver 3. I'm all over it. He's still young. He's given us the production, had the 1,000-yard season this year, and there is that clear room to grow. So that's why he's my number 3. I do love Ceedee Lamb, but you have to acknowledge some of the risk associated as well. And I've actually seen him as a sell high in a lot of places because the narrative is that he's going to step into a much bigger role with Amari Cooper gone, where the reality is the target share might not increase that much. And to your point, I'd love to see that 25% plus for him in year 3.
Now, the next 2 guys here, same way we had Mixon and McCaffrey as these wily vets that were near the top of our dynasty rankings. Now we have a tier of Cooper Kupp and Stefon Diggs. Cooper Kupp coming in 5th on our list, coming off of his age 28 season, about to be 29. What we've seen from Cooper Kupp is that he's been at or on pace for 1,100 receiving yards the last 3 seasons. Since Matthew Stafford has been brought in to LA, he's made the Sean McVay offense hum. And we just saw Kupp have the best wide receiver season we've seen in some time. This is all-time historic Calvin Johnson level history of a season from Cooper Kupp. And you just have to chase that ceiling. That's why we have Kupp in the top 5. Even if he's 70% of what he was last year in 2022 with Allen Robinson and Cam Akers coming back to the offense, he's still a set it and forget it wide receiver 1 for the next season, if not longer, because not much has changed in that LA situation. The Rams are just going to keep trading away their first-round pick and running it back, and running it back in the Sean McVay era.
Yeah, I mean, with Cooper Kupp, it just comes down to, do you want to win your dynasty league right now? And if you do, Cooper Kupp's the guy you want. We love talking about these young guys, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. They're great in their own right, both top 5 finishes last season. But we talk about these A.J. Browns, and he's going to have that big boom breakout season. Ceedee Lamb's finally going to take that step to be a top 5 receiver. But why not just take Cooper Kupp? Because we already have it. Like, there's no reason. He's been good to this point in his career. He had that one season where he was like the wide receiver 2 through 10 weeks before he got injured and missed the rest of the year. So we've seen these flashes before from Kupp. And then, Matt Stafford comes in, and it's absolute domination. So with Cooper Kupp, I mean, even in the playoffs, all these playoff teams, the Cardinals, the Bucks, the 49ers, the Bengals, they know that the Rams are going to Cooper Kupp. And what's so impressive is that even though they know Cooper Kupp is going to get fed the ball, he's still putting up games of 9 for 183 and 1, 11 for 142 and 2, 8 for 92 and 2. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the connection between Kupp and Stafford, it's just there. It's fantastic. It's at a level we haven't seen in a long time. Like, it's rivaling the Brady Welker connection, the Brady Gronk connection. Like, that's the type of the Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison type connection. That's what these two guys have. It's historical. So with Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford just got that extension. It really insulates Kupp for the next couple of years. He's already been talking about his next deal, and he's going to work with the Rams to find something that's really fair and right for both sides, which you love to see from these players that aren't just forcing themselves out if they're not the highest paid guy. But with Cooper Kupp, you mentioned going to be 29 this year. There's no reason to believe that he's not going to be a top, 3 wide receiver at worst, because even if he had 75% of the production that he had last year, he'd still probably be the wide receiver 1. Even with Allen Robinson coming in, you basically replaced the Robert Woods role that was then taken by Odell Beckham with Allen Robinson. Maybe Allen Robinson's a little more of a threat around the goal line, things like that. But Cooper Kupp, no reason he's still not far and away going to be that number 1 target for Stafford.
And I'm high on A-Rob too. I'm smashing A-Rob in Dynasty
sleeper.
And Redraft. I think he's a value everywhere. Feels like he has been his entire career. But moving down to number 6, staying in this 28-year-old target monster, Stefon Diggs. He's in a funnel situation tethered to a top-tier quarterback in Josh Allen. Diggs has very little competition, but contrary to a situation like A.J. Brown, if A.J. Brown has to compete with a Treylon Burks or has to compete with a Drake London in Tennessee, I think that's a huge detriment to his target share. Not necessarily maybe his dynasty value because he's still a stud, but we would bring him down a little bit. With Stefon Diggs, I think adding another weapon could actually help this offense because there aren't enough targets to go around. Buffalo was 4th in pass attempts last year. They run with a high pace of play. You have Josh Allen taking over games with his arm in shootouts since the running game in Buffalo continually stinks. And that volume in Buffalo is what's so appealing for Stefon Diggs, not to mention the stability with the 4-year, $104 million monster extension that includes $70 million guaranteed. Buffalo is making a statement with this Diggs signing. They are going all in for a Super Bowl with this Josh Allen window. Diggs is 28, just like Cooper Kupp, but he's coming off 4 back-to-back seasons of 1,000 yards. And what we've seen historically, smaller receivers hold up longer. We're still seeing strong seasons from the likes of Keenan Allen and Tyler Lockett. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins have amazing seasons at age 27 and 28 as well. Diggs is a great win-now piece that I am willing to sell in a rebuild in season per peak value. But if you're contending, he's got to be one of the top guys you need to have as your hopefully wide receiver 2, if not wide receiver 1.
Yeah, Diggs is the perfect contending roster wide receiver. I mean, Cooper Kupp, you mentioned going into his age 29 season, so this can apply to him as well. But we play Dynasty in these 2 to 3 year windows, and Stefon Diggs just signed that 4-year extension. Josh Allen's not going where. Diggs in his age 28, 29, 30 seasons should still be playing at a high level. So Diggs for this next 3-year window is still going to be fantastic, and people are not valuing him properly right now because he didn't have this plethora of pop games in 2021. He only had 1 game at 30 points or more, and it was right at 30 fantasy points, 8 for 162 and 1. We're used to seeing these top receivers go off, hit or miss throughout the season. But Stefon Diggs, even with just a steady, consistent year, was the PPR wide receiver 7, played every single game, was Josh Allen's clear, far and away number 1 target. You love to see the targets that he gets in this offense after 166 in 2020, came back with 163 last year.
Ooh.
And if you are a contender, I just think you should be going to acquire Stefon Diggs, or you should be trying to, because in one league, we both just acquired him. In separate leagues, we're in together. One of them, I traded Amon-Ra St. Brown in a second-round pick and got Stefon Diggs. And then the league where you got him right before you saw my deal, and then you offered Amon-Ra St. Brown. And there were some other pieces involved, but basically what amounted to be a late first or an early second, if we look at the values, for Stefon Diggs. And I was mad because now I couldn't get him from you. So this is just a perfect piece for these contending rosters. Absolutely love Stefon Diggs. He's insulated in Buffalo with his contract and with Josh Allen at quarterback. You're right. They could bring in a receiver even in the first round, and I wouldn't be worried about Stefon Diggs' volume and his role in the offense. So wheels up for Diggs. The reason we have Kupp in front of him, even though Kupp's a year older, is just because of the production that Kupp gave us. There's no reason for us to fade that right now. We got to keep riding that wave. But Stefon Diggs, man, I think he's a buy low right now. People are starting to come around, but with this rookie draft type and things going on, I'd be trying to acquire him if I was contending.
100%. Now let's move over to a wide receiver 7 right now. I actually have him higher in my own personal rankings. I have him above Ceedee Lamb, which I know is a hot take for a lot of people. Once we get into some of the production, these guys have been very similar, and T has actually outproduced him in year 2. But with T. Higgins, if you're scared of Jamar Chase, get rid of that. You should chase what matters, which is fantasy points. He was wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game in 2021. T. Higgins is what I believe the best wide receiver 2 in the league. He's a super efficient wide receiver 2, 900 yards as a rookie, just under 1,100 yards as a sophomore in the NFL in 14 games, and was commanding volume. A 24% target share is not a fluke for T. Higgins, and was super, super efficient with that target share, with top 10 metrics and yards per out run, yards per target. When he was on the field, he was dominant. I know a lot of people are writing some of his production off when you look at his season-long stats because he did get inflated by that Baltimore game where he had 12 receptions for 194 yards and 2 touchdowns. But what that showed us was a glimpse of what his upside can be. That was a gift from the fantasy gods where we got to see if T. Higgins was playing against nobodies in a great game script, what can he do? And he gave us everything we needed in the right environment. He will go nuclear. I do have him a little bit lower in redraft versus Dynasty because the 23-year age puts a premium on T. Higgins. And he's going to have to get paid before Jamar Chase. The fact that they did take him first in the second round means they're not going to have that 5th-year option. But you also add in the same reasons we love Jamar Chase, why we have him as our number 1. All those reasons apply, being tethered to Joe Burrow in that offense with the offensive line. I'd probably say I'm higher than most on T. Higgins, and I'm not afraid of that at all. I'm extremely bullish on what he's going to do for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I've come around on T. Higgins, for a while there. I didn't have him as a top 12 receiver in Dynasty, and I was in that camp that was like, oh, he's never going to be the number 1, and maybe his entire career because Jamar Chase is there. But you have really brought me into the fold on the T. Higgins hype. I've got him firmly inside of my top 10. Right now, he's at my number 8 Dynasty wide receiver, and you said it best. He's the best number 2 wide receiver in the league, and you wouldn't be fade. We didn't fade Chris Godwin because of Mike Evans. Imagine if you faded Reggie Wayne because of Marvin Harrison. Imagine if
Calvin Ridley because of Julio.
Calvin Ridley because of Julio Jones. Like there's time and time again where we can see these teams have 2 incredible, highly productive wide receivers. And with T. Higgins, yes, Jamar Chase on the course of the season, likely on the course of his career, we'll see how these 2 guys end up playing out. A lot of things change, but if we're just going to look at projecting the next couple of years, on the course of the year, we expect Jamar Chase to have a much better season, but on a week-to-week basis, there are weeks where teams are going to game plan to get Jamar Chase out of the game and to take away his playmaking ability. And when we saw that happen in 2021, we saw T. Higgins explode. T. Higgins had these pop weeks, one of them against Baltimore, that shootout game against the Chargers, 9 for 138-1, against Pittsburgh, 6 for 114-1, had another 15 target game earlier in the season. So there are weeks where T. Higgins can take over, and even if the defense isn't game planning out Jamar Chase, I know there's that Joe Burrow Jamar Chase connection, but if Joe Burrow is just loving the matchups that week with T. Higgins, and he's loving the reads that he's getting from T. Higgins, he's going to keep going back to him as long as it's working. So talent wise, it's absolutely there for T. He'd be most teams' number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, and there's no reason to fade him just because he happens to play with another stud. So there's going to be the games where they both get theirs. There might be some quiet games. That's something you have to accept. If it is one of those Jamar Chase takeover weeks, maybe T. Higgins has a down game here or there. But then again, we see that from number 1s all the time in the NFL. So With T. Higgins, you do have to kind of take the ebbs and flows of the season, take the ups with the downs, but there's going to be a lot of that action in the middle. You just have to ride out the talent in the offense in Cincinnati.
Another player whose game-by-game averages are very similar to T. Higgins, which a lot of people don't know, is DK Metcalf, who is our wide receiver 8.
Mm-hmm.
This is a rough analysis to do because the situation is absolutely brutal, right? And
it's probably going to change.
We're talking mostly about 2022, right? There's this uncertainty level that comes into play with a gross rebuild that they're executing right now in Seattle. Who knows how much longer Pete Carroll is going to be there? Who knows if they draft Malik Willis in a couple days? But even if they do find their next franchise quarterback, are they going to be as good throwing the ball deep downfield as Russell Wilson? I tend to think no. And that's why I did have to drop DK Metcalf down. I'm not trying to overreact to the situation. I would have had him firmly top 5 a year ago. But Russell Wilson leaving that offense in Seattle was the worst thing ever for DK's value and really his ceiling, right? I think from a floor perspective, we saw it in the games with Geno Smith or with the banged up Russell Wilson, he was able to get his. And we saw DK Metcalf in 2021 get 129 targets for the second year in a row, have what should have been 1,000 yards, 967 yards, pretty darn close, but over 1,600 air yards and 12 touchdowns. So at this point, I think he's clearly the wide receiver 1 over a declining Tyler Lockett. Was a low-end wide receiver 2 from a fantasy points per game basis. So you add on the boom-bust quotient for DK Metcalf, the loss of Russell Wilson, the fact that he might be in flux, I think the reasons to lower DK's value, but not to fade. And if people are fading, you need to buy low right now, especially if you're in a rebuild, because that lack of production in 2022 could be huge to help you get an earlier draft pick in 2023. So he's the number one buy low right now on rebuilding rosters because he's on that track to be bad in 2022. And we'll believe in the player talent, the draft capital, the athletic ability, all the reasons. Like, we know what DK Metcalf can do. He had that wide receiver 1 season in 2020. We know he has it in him. We just got to pray for the situation to continue to evolve and hopefully get better over time.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. You know, he is a discounted value right now. He's still only 24 years old. So we believe that, you know, Geno Smith and Drew Lock aren't going to be his quarterback forever. So that's why he is suppressed value right now. I actually picked him up from you in a league where you're a little bit closer to contending than I am, and I'm just trying to accrue value. I'm just banking on that situation improving. Hopefully, if it's not 2022, for 2023, we still haven't seen an extension from DK. There are those trade rumors swirling around. You know, we're not expecting these guys to get moved. We're not banking on that, but that's what we said about Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams. So you never know. He could end up getting moved, and the situation could change just like that. Or even if they brought in a Jimmy Garoppolo or even a Baker Mayfield, or if they drafted someone like a Kenny Pickett who could be this accurate quarterback right off the bat, hit DK Metcalf. Maybe not on these deep balls, although Pickett does have pretty good accuracy at all 3 levels. But that would be a big improvement for DK Metcalf as well. So I think his situation will get better. I don't think it could get much worse than it is right now. But he's probably going to finish somewhere, if I had to project right now, from like wide receiver 16 to 20, and it's going to be really inconsistent. So he's going to help your team some weeks. He's going to hurt your team some weeks if the situation holds true with Drew Lock and Geno Smith battling it out for that quarterback spot. But with DK Metcalf, similar to what we said about A.J. Brown, we just want to see that volume. If we could see a DK Metcalf season with supreme volume, like an 150-plus target type season with a really good quarterback, that's what would take their value to the next level. And with DK, the situation just doesn't match the talent right now, which is why he's suppressed a little bit on our list and why he's ranked in the back part of our top 12.
Now, number 9, and I'm so happy to see this player.
This is a hot take.
In the top 12, Diontae Johnson. What a rise for Diontae. I unfortunately sold high last year in a couple package deals, and I think I was a year too early on Diontae Johnson. Pittsburgh is killing it with the second and third round wide receivers. They took Diontae Johnson at the 302. They took Juju in the late second, Claypool in the mid second. And from what we've seen with Diontae Johnson in 2019, that rookie year was brutal. That was the Mason Rudolph, Duck Hodges year. But what we actually saw, and one of the things I was hanging my hat on with Diontae Johnson, was that he led the league in target separation per playerprofiler.com. And then in his second year, he was a wide receiver 2, top 10 in targets, even though he was outside the top 20 with a 23% target share. So we thought, okay, this is just a check down Charlie for Big Ben. It's a sustainable production. And we thought, Big Ben would have to take a step down, and that would impact Diontae. But what we saw in year 3 for Diontae Johnson in 2021 was a monster breakout. Over 100 receptions, just under 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, was second in the league in targets with a 28.5% target share, 4th in the NFL. That is Davante Adams, Stefon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins type target share. That is elite volume commanding that Diontae is doing right now. Was top 10 in receptions, yards after the catch, red zone targets, surprisingly 13th in deep targets. So that I think Diontae Johnson, much like Stefon Diggs, is this athletic separator. It's one of the reasons we love Garrett Wilson in this draft. It's more of that slim but like fluid, beat you off the line, get open all over the field type of receiver. He can do it short, he can do it deep. He took that next step when we saw Juju Smith-Schuster leave the offense. I know Najee Harris came in and filled in some of that volume. But what Diontae's shown us is that he is good at football. He's been a wide receiver 1 at 25 years old. He was wide receiver 8 last year in fantasy points per game. We can talk about the short-term outlook with Trubisky. It's probably not going to be great, but this is a guy who's commanded an elite-level target share just now entering his prime.
Yeah, Diontae, I was surprised that he ended up here in our rankings because he's not like the sexiest name. He's not this big athletic freak like the DK Metcalfs and the AJ Browns. He doesn't have as long of a productive track record like we see from some of the older guys in front of him on our list, the Stefon Diggs, the Cooper Kupps. But, for as crazy as everyone's going about AJ Brown, about DK Metcalf, like Diontae Johnson just posted just as good a season, if not better, than those guys have had to this point in their career. Diontae Johnson, you mentioned it, 2nd in the league in targets. I'm so glad you brought up Stefon Diggs. Pretty good comp for what he's giving you from a fantasy perspective, just an absolute target monster. In 2021, we saw Diontae Johnson score below 12 PPR points one time, and he still gave you 9.8 fantasy points. So, he still didn't absolutely crater your week, just so consistent. Didn't give you a ton of super high-end Jamar Chase level pop games with, 200-plus yards. But Diontae Johnson's getting it done each and every week. And when you get 169 targets, it's hard not to do that. So with Juju Smith-Schuster officially moving on from the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though he's been kind of on and off the field over the past couple of seasons, with Mitch Trubisky coming in, who I honestly think is probably a quarterback upgrade. Like Big Ben at that point in his career is not the Hall of Famer Big Ben. He just wasn't. So I think Trubisky, if anything, you could consider him a lateral move. I think he's going to lock in on Diontae as his number 1 target moving forward. And Diontae is going to be 26 years old this season, so still before that age apex for the wide receiver position. So I love Diontae Johnson. I think he's a buy low as well, just because people aren't drawn to the name of Diontae as someone who's one of these top-end dynasty wide receivers. But I like him for a rebuild where you're maybe 1 or 2 years out. Go ahead and acquire him now. Maybe the situation gets better by 2023, 2024. And I love him for contenders as well. So Diontae Johnson, super strong wide receiver, another buy low on our list. And there's a lot of guys you could probably flip for him 1 for 1. People are crazy about DJ Moore. People are crazy about Jalen Waddle. People are crazy about
DK
Terry
Metcalf.
McLaurin. For as crazy as people are about Terry McLaurin's never been inside better than the top 20 in terms of PPR points per game at the end of a season at the wide receiver spot. And he's a year older, and he's in a worse situation. So for as crazy as people are about guys like Terry McLaurin and some of the other young guys on this list, we'd both much rather take Diontae in any kind of roster build that you have. So another buy low and another guy that's just firmly in our top 10.
On top of all of that, what's very clear is that the Steelers love Diontae Johnson. He led the league in routes run, 98% route participation, which was number 2 in the league, and then the 3rd highest snap share among any wide receiver at 91%. So Diontae Johnson will be on the field getting open. Let's shift over to number 10 on our list. Davante Adams, he's elite. He's the clear alpha, number 1 target magnet, outside X playmaker, stud wide receiver. Any adjective you want to throw onto this player about a top-end wide receiver, that is Davante Adams, and he's still an easy top 10 wide receiver in 2022. I did a full breakdown when we were talking about the free agency moves. I'm not going to go all the way down that rabbit hole today, but if you look at Adams in Green Bay his last 3 years, 12th in attempts, 32% target share, 13th in attempts, 34% target share, 8th in attempts, 30% target share. If you look at what's happened over the last couple of years with Derek Carr, He was actually 5th in pass attempts, more than any of those seasons with Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a huge positive signal for Adams. Before that was 14th, and 12th. He's averaging throughout his career 35 attempts a game. I think that's plenty volume for Davante Adams to get close to where he was in Green Bay. I think you add in the fact that Derek Carr is not going to be as efficient as Aaron Rodgers from a touchdown perspective, or even from a yards downfield perspective. You add in the heightened level of competition with Darren Waller in the mix. Even if we bring that 30% target share down to a 26, 27, Adams can still get it done at a high level. And I imagine with Davante Adams, they're not going to bring a guy in and make him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, recreate this Derek Carr, Davante Adams connection from Fresno State. They're not going to do all this if they're not going to give him the damn ball. So I'm all in on Adams, and I think a lot of people are fading him, particularly in Dynasty, because of the new landing spot.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect buy for a contending roster. I mean, 169 targets last year is nuts. I think in Vegas this year, I'd be shocked if he didn't get at least 150. I mean, he had 149 in 14 games in Green Bay in 2020. That's when he was the wide receiver 1 on the season. But I do still think he's going to get those 150 targets, looking at 9-10 targets a game with Derek Carr. I know Waller's there. I know Renfro's there. But to your point, you don't trade a first and a second round pick, give him a 5-year, $141 million deal for him to not come in and just be the guy all over the field and let those other guys be your auxiliary options. And
Davante Adams was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game the last 6 seasons, and he just turned 29.
Yeah, and we like to talk about those 3-year windows, those 2 to 3 year windows in Dynasty. Yes, Davante Adams at the time of this recording is already 29 years old, but he signed a 5-year extension, and we've seen these receivers be really productive into their age 30, 31 season. A lot of times we start to see that breakdown happen around age 32. We saw it from guys like Andre Johnson. We've seen it more recently from Julio Jones. The body starts to break down a little
AJ
bit.
Green.
But for this season, for 2023 at the least, I still expect Davante Adams to be a wide receiver 1 and probably a top-end wide receiver 1. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked one bit if Davante Adams was a top 3 wide receiver in 2022. So I just wonder who these defenses are going to garter on the goal line. I mean, I think the biggest loser from this is probably Hunter Renfrow. But the truth is, Hunter Renfrow in the slot is so good inside the 5 with some of his route running. You bring Davante Adams into the mix, and it's going to be a nightmare for these defenses picking who to garter on the goal line. So I think Davante Adams is going to continue to eat. I think this is going to help Derek Carr a ton as well. But again, that's beside the point. We're talking wide receivers here. Don't fade Davante Adams completely because of this trade. Yes, we don't like the situation quite as much in Vegas as we liked it in Green Bay, but it's definitely not as big of a drop-off as I'm seeing from a lot of people in their rankings and the narratives around this Raiders team. It's not as big of a drop-off as we're going to see, I think, from Tyreek Hill, who goes from Kansas City to Miami, and I think we'll talk about him in a little bit as well.
So last 2 on our list for today's top 12, Deebo Samuel, who we could hear trade breaking news from him any minute now. He wants out of San Francisco. I believe it's primarily because he wants to be done with this taking carries between the tackles. He does not want to be used like a running back unless they're going to pay him like that, and I don't think they will in San Francisco. So he said, you know what? I'm out. I'm done with this Shanahan thing. I don't want to play as a running back and get my body all beat up. So we're talking about a guy who's had a pretty robust injury history. This was the first year he could stay healthy. And I mean, what we did see from Deebo was absolute dominance. That's why he is still here as a wide receiver 1. And I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that Deebo actually lands in a better spot post-trade to a team that's going to pepper him with volume. If they're bringing Deebo Samuel in, they know what they're getting with him. And we saw nothing but great production as a rookie, the down year in 2020 with the injury, with pretty much being a running back through the air. They were giving him screens behind the line of scrimmage all day long. But then you add in now in year 3, over 1,400 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns through the air, not to mention 59 carries for 365 yards on the ground and 8 touchdowns on the ground, just making big plays all over the field. Deebo, to me, looks similar physically to like the Jamar Chases of the world, where he's not like this oversized big body DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. He's not this super slim Diontae Johnson, Stefon Diggs. So I love that from the type of player that he is. He's more of that Chris Godwin, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson type of player. And I think that does give him some safety in that value, but we did move him down a little bit on this list, coming off a season where he was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game.
I know you mentioned there are a couple situations that might be better. I tend to think a lot are probably going to be worse. I mean, the only two right off the bat that would make sense would be Kansas City or Green Bay, but then you ask yourself, why would they trade away the guys they didn't want to pay to then give up draft capital to pay another wide receiver? So I find those unlikely. I think we could see him go to a team that's just not very good. And in that case, you are hoping for the volume, but it could be a DK Metcalf situation. Like if he goes to the Jets, if he was to go to the Texans, one of these teams with a young quarterback that you hope has promise, but we haven't seen it yet, I don't know that it's going to be better for Deebo. And he's a sneaky 26 years old already. So again, we like that because he still does have a couple more years before he hits that age apex at the wide receiver spot. But he's a little bit older than, I thought of in my mind. And I'm sure a lot of people thought he might still be in his 24, 25-year season as well. So we like Deebo. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him over the next week or so. I would expect if he's going to get moved, it's going to happen on or before the NFL draft. So by the time you're listening, by the time you're watching, we might have more action here. But just the talent and the skill set he brings and his yards after the catch ability, he's going to be able to make those boom plays no matter where he's playing, no matter what uniform he's wearing. Kind of similar to Tyreek Hill now as we shift over to our number 12 wide receiver in these rankings. Tyreek Hill is number 12 in our rankings because he goes from Kansas City, where he's been in an incredibly safe, insulated situation with the best quarterback of our generation. His past 5 seasons, we saw wide receiver 8, wide receiver 1. Then he missed some time, but still had a really good 800-yard season in 12 games. Then he was wide receiver 2, wide receiver 6. So Tyreek Hill, we know what he is. No one else can do what Tyreek Hill does at the NFL level. But he does shift to Miami, and now we have to say, hey, the volume is going to be lower with the Dolphins. The target competition arguably could be stronger with Jalen Waddle there close to the line of scrimmage, guys like Mike Gesicki, Chase Edmonds out of the backfield as well, Cedric Wilson, a guy they brought in free agency. And then we also have to say the quarterback play just straight up isn't going to be as good. Tua Tagovailoa has pretty good deep accuracy, but he doesn't throw the ball deep very much. So the question is, is it the chicken or the egg? Did he not throw it deep because he didn't have that downfield threat, or did he not throw it deep because he's scared to do it and he likes to stick closer to the line of scrimmage at the NFL level? So, Steph, I know I'm a little bit higher still on Tyreek Hill than you are in these dynasty leagues. Are you completely out on Tyreek Hill at age 28?
I am, based on his value right now, because I think he's a couple injuries from being that next Deshaun Jackson, where teams want him for his speed, but he's not delivering consistently. And Tua is a massive downgrade from Mahomes. And you mentioned some of the volume concerns. I have a lot of concerns, honestly, with this whole new system. There's so much uncertainty in Miami that it's really hard for me to be on any of the guys there, plant my flag. I'll take whoever's the cheapest, whether it's the running backs, whether it's the wide receiver, or as a super late, double-digit round name. I'll take Tua as just an upside stash in these 1 QB leagues, maybe. Would probably go with a rookie as opposed to a Tua just because of the upside. Bringing in Teron Armstead, I think, was huge for that offense, but doesn't necessarily guarantee everything. And I don't want to just copy and paste the San Francisco thing that Mike McDaniels is bringing over into Miami, because I think the personnel is slightly different. And if they're trying to make Tua a Jimmy G plus, that's not that appealing to me. I don't really want that. I think that causes a lot of issues. Even though all these guys can get theirs in the offense, I just don't see a top 5 ceiling for Tyreek Hill this season. And I think it's just downhill after that. So I have DJ Moore as my wide receiver 12, the dynasty darling himself, who's been perpetually in this horrible situation. And the fact that he is just freshly 25 years old, whereas you have Tyreek Hill at age 28. But I will give you some props on the deal you just made in one of our leagues to acquire Tyreek Hill, because I thought he fit into your roster nicely. We aren't naive enough to say that Tyreek Hill is not going to have more of these boom potential pop games. I just think they're going to be less and less common this season and subsequently in seasons over time.
Yeah, it's totally fair. And you're right. I did kind of snipe you a little bit there on the 12 spot. I know you do have DJ Moore. I had Tyreek Hill. So we'll consider it a tie for the purpose of this video at the number 12. DJ Moore was my number 13. So splitting hairs there for sure. And I do agree with you. I think Tyreek Hill at current value probably is worth selling. I think people value him higher than they should. The reason I did go and acquire him in that league, coming off of a championship in that one. Cooper Kupp's my wide receiver 1. My wide receiver 2 was Jerry Jeudy. So a little bit of uncertainty there. It's a double flex league. I was deep at running back. I flipped Josh Jacobs and a first-round pick for Tyreek Hill and a 2023 second. So in terms of value, I probably lost on the deal. I like Jacobs a lot this season, but just looking at my roster, I wanted that pop potential in my wide receiver 2 spot, can bump Jeudy down to the flex. So again, we're not in or out on most of these guys. Everyone has a price for your roster construction as well, even as we talk through older guys like Cooper Kupp and Stefon Diggs. And then if we flipped it over to the AJ Browns and the DK Metcalfs of the world, all players in our top 12 can fit into these different roster constructions. And you might have a guy, you might have a roster that makes more sense for you to have DK Metcalf than it does for you to have a Cooper Kupp. And even though we have DK Metcalf low on our list, doesn't necessarily mean you need to go sell him to try to get someone higher than him just based on your current situation. So we're yearning for that upgrade at quarterback. It's the narrative with DJ Moore. It is just that quarterback spot.
And even with the worst situation you can imagine, horrible offensive line, Sam Darnold throwing interceptions every other pass. The problem with DJ Moore to this point has been receiving touchdowns. He's had 4 receiving touchdowns the last 4 years, but in these horrible situations, he's been on the crest of 1,200 receiving yards the last 3 years, and he's coming off a season 2021, again, just turned 25, so plenty of runway. He has arguably 4 or 5 years left in the tank, and he had a 28.3% target share last year. Robbie Anderson's trending down. Terrace Marshall is busted. So I just think it's nothing but runway and upside for DJ Moore this season going forward, because he's commanding the volume. He's doing it consistently. We know the talent is there. The age is young. And so from a dynasty perspective, DJ Moore checks almost every box. We just hope the situation around him can evolve. We can relate DJ Moore very similarly to a DK Metcalf, but I think at this point, most of the diehard dynasty gamers are just holding tight on DJ Moore. And we should be thinking the same way about DK Metcalf right now, where you should hold tight if you have him. Don't just sell because, it's Drew Lock, I got to get out of this. Things can change quickly in the NFL. And if you didn't learn anything else from this free agency that we just sat through, know that things can change super, super quick. But thank you all so much for listening and watching. If you like what you hear on the show, a like and a sub, greatly, greatly appreciated. And we'll see you all next time. Peace.
Peace.